7 o'clock at the Castellano estate sounded the same as it always did. The grandfather clock chimed in the hallway. The espresso machine hissed downstairs in Rose's kitchen, and out on the gravel drive a black town car idled, waiting. Damien Castellano stood before the floor-length mirror in his bedroom, adjusting the silver clip on his black silk tie. His suit was charcoal, hand-tailored. Beneath the jacket, against his ribs, the holster sat snug. The Beretta inside it had been cleaned the night before. Everything in the room was in its place. That was how a man like him survived past 37 in a city where his last name made him a target. His phone buzzed on the marble dresser. Tony, his consigliere, had been texting since 6. The capos were gathering in Charlestown. Salvatore wanted him at the breakfast table by 7:30. The bedroom door creaked open behind him. "Daddy, look, I found this in your old box. There's stuff inside it." Damien's hand stilled on the tie clip. In the mirror he saw her. Pink pajamas, dark hair tangled from sleep, bare feet on the cold hardwood. In her arms she carried a wooden box, both small hands pressed against its sides. "Put it down, Sophie. Daddy's busy." She did not put it down. She shook the box once. Something inside slid against the wood, and beneath that, a faint metallic chime, soft and silver. His hand stopped moving. "My ball rolled under your bed," Sophie explained quickly. "It was way in the back. The box was way back too. Like somebody pushed it there and forgot." The phone buzzed again. He did not look at it. He turned. She stood in the middle of the rug, holding the box out in both hands. The boss of the Castellano family looked at his daughter, and for a moment, somewhere beneath the holster and the tailored wool, something old and unguarded moved in his chest. "Let me see." He crossed the room. Walnut, dark with age. The brass latch had gone green at the corners. Along one edge, scratched into the wood with something thin and sharp, a single letter shaped like a careful M. He did not remember the box. He prided himself on remembering everything, and yet, looking at it, his chest tightened the way it tightened only before something dangerous. "I don't recognize this. Where did you find it?" "Under your bed." "Daddy, I already opened it a little. Just peeked." "What did you see?" "A picture, and something shiny, and a letter." She paused, careful, and there was a lady. She looked like me, but her skin was darker. The room narrowed. Damien did not breathe. "Sophie, sit down on the bed." She did, settling the box on her small lap. He lowered himself onto the mattress beside her. He had sat in this exact spot 10,000 times. He had never sat in it like this. He reached for the lid. His hand was shaking. The same hand that had pulled a trigger in a basement in the North End 2 months ago without a tremor was refusing to obey him. He lifted the latch. The hinge gave a small dry sound. The lid came up. A photograph. Face down. A folded letter. Yellowed at the edges. A small bundle wrapped in pale cloth. Something inside catching the morning light through a thin gap in the fold. His hand moved, slow and unwilling, toward the photograph. He turned it over. He looked at it, and Damien Castellano, who had not lost his breath in a fight or a funeral, sat on the edge of his own bed with his daughter beside him and could not pull air into his lungs. The photograph was small, no larger than the palm of his hand, the edges softened by years of being closed inside the dark. The colors had faded the way old photographs faded, warm and slightly yellow, as if the past itself had been steeped in late afternoon light. A younger man stood at the back of the frame. No suit, no holster, no calculation in his face, just a white t-shirt, the sleeves loose around arms that had not yet learned to carry the weight they carried now. His hand rested on the shoulder of a woman seated on a porch step in front of him. He was smiling. Damien Castellano had forgotten he had ever smiled like that. The woman was beautiful. Brown skin warmed by the sun, long dark curls falling against her shoulder, her head tilted slightly back as though she had just laughed at something the man behind her said. In her arms she held a baby in a yellow onesie, no more than 6 months old. One tiny fist curled against the woman's collarbone. Damien did not realize he was crying until a tear struck the back of his hand. "Is that you, Daddy?" Sophie leaned in, close enough that her hair brushed his sleeve. "You look softer." He could not answer. His throat had closed. Sophie's small finger moved across the photograph, careful, almost reverent. It came to rest on the woman. "Who is she? Why is she holding the baby that looks like me?" A kitchen rose up behind Damien's eyes. A small one, in a brick walk-up in the South End, with mismatched pots on an old stove and a window that never closed all the way. Maya stood at that stove, 8 months pregnant, stirring a pot of chicken soup, humming under her breath. He had come up behind her and put his hands on her belly, and she had laughed and said, "The baby kicks every time you do that, you know, like she already knows your hands." Before that, the emergency room at Mass General. He had been bleeding through his shirt, a bullet between 2 ribs. He had been telling the room he was fine when a young nurse with steady hands and tired eyes had leaned over him and said quietly, "Sir, you're not fine, but I'm going to make you fine. Hold still." Her name tag had said Brooks. He reached for the letter. The paper was dry under his fingers. The fold had been pressed for years. When he opened it, the crease almost cracked. The handwriting was hers. He knew it before he read a word. "Damien, please don't burn this before reading it all." His vision blurred. He had read those words before. He remembered now, all at once, like a door kicked open in the dark. 5 years ago, in his study downstairs, with another letter in his hand and a fire in the grate. He had read that first line, decided what it meant, and dropped the paper into the flames before his eyes reached the second sentence. He had been so sure. "Daddy," Sophie tugged gently at his cuff. "Who wrote it? Who is the lady?" He looked at his daughter. He had to swallow twice before his voice would work. "Her name is Maya. She's..." His chest cracked on the word. "She was your mother, baby." Sophie went very still. "My mommy?" Her brow drew together, the small wrinkle she got when something did not match what she had been told. "But Grandpa Salvatore said Mommy went to heaven when I was a baby. He said she got sick." Damien broke. He did not mean to. He had not cried in front of her. Not once. Not when she had nightmares and asked for a mother she could not name. Not when she had drawn pictures in kindergarten of a family with only a father in it. But he understood now. In one terrible motion, what his father had said to her, what his father had said to him, what had been built on top of that lie for 5 years. A small hand touched his cheek. "Don't cry, Daddy." Sophie's voice was steady, steadier than his. "I have a face like hers, right?" He nodded. He could barely manage it. "Yes, baby. You have her eyes. Her exact eyes." Sophie reached into the box. She lifted the small bundle of pale cloth and unwrapped it on her lap with the careful seriousness of a child opening a present meant for someone else. The cloth fell away. A silver bracelet, child-sized, lay across her palm. A tiny heart charm hung from it, and on the heart, engraved in thin, clean letters, a single S. "S for Sophie?" she whispered. He could not speak. He pulled her into his chest, the bracelet still in her hand, and held her like a man holding the last piece of something he had not known was still alive. Out in the hallway, sharp and unhurried, the sound of high heels began to approach the bedroom door. Rosa lowered herself into the armchair by the window. Her knees had been bad for years, and today they seemed worse. She wiped her hands on her apron, a slow, automatic motion, the same one she had used for 30 years to wipe away flour, water, blood, and prayer. Damien did not sit. He stood near the foot of the bed, Sophie now perched on the edge with the bracelet in her lap, her small body turned toward Rosa with an attention that no 6-year-old should have been able to summon at that hour. "Miss Maya came to me," Rosa began, "the day before she disappeared." Her voice was thin and uneven. She kept her eyes on the rug. It was in the laundry room, down by the back stairs. She had Sophie with her in the stroller. The little girl was a year old, sleeping, with that little yellow blanket she liked. Rosa's hand drifted up toward her own throat. Miss Maya was shaking. Mr. Damien. Shaking so hard she could barely hold the door. Sophie did not move. Damien did not breathe. She put a little box in my hands. The bracelet was inside. She said, "Rosa, if anything happens to me, please, give this to Sophie when she is old enough, and tell her her mother loved her every day." Damien's voice cracked out of him. "Why didn't you tell me, Rosa? Why?" The old woman flinched as though he had raised a hand. Tears spilled from her eyes without sound. "Mr. Salvatore came to me that same evening. Mr. Damien." Damien went still. He sat down at my kitchen table. He drank my coffee. He spoke very softly. He always spoke softly when he wanted something. Rosa pressed her knuckles to her mouth. He reminded me that my Thomas had been put on the family insurance because of his heart. He reminded me that my grandson was waiting on the answer to his application at the restaurant in the North End. And then he said, "Grief makes women dramatic. Rosa, don't let confusion ruin your family's future." Damien turned away. He walked to the window. He walked back. His jaw worked once, twice. When the words came out of him, they were a hiss between his teeth. "My own father." Rosa lifted her face. She was looking at Sophie now, and the pain in her eyes was the pain of a woman who had carried a child's name in her mouth for 5 years without being allowed to speak it. "Forgive me," little girl. I should have been braver." Sophie slid off the bed. She crossed the rug in her bare feet and stopped in front of the old woman. She reached up and put her small hand into Rosa's wrinkled one. "It's okay, Nana Rosa." Rosa broke. She bent her white head over Sophie's hand and wept into it. Quietly, the way old women wept when they had been holding something for too long. Damien forced himself to keep moving, to keep asking, "Where did she go?" "Roxbury." Rosa straightened, wiping her cheeks with her apron. "There was a woman who raised her. Mama June, she called her. A foster mother from when Miss Maya was a girl. She went to her. And the man." Damien's voice was rough. "There was a man with her. A driver. I saw him from the window." Rosa nodded, slow and tired. Marcus Wells. The name went through him like a cold current. He had said that name once, 5 years ago, in the back room of a club in Dorchester, with his fists already broken open and Marcus Wells on the floor between his shoes. "Mr. Damien." Rosa's eyes met his and did not look away. Marcus was her brother in spirit, not in any other way. He was the boy she grew up beside at the foster home. He drove her that night because there was no one else. Damien sat down on the edge of the bed. He had to. Rosa reached into the deep pocket of her apron. She brought out a small, folded square of paper, the creases worn pale from years of being kept. "She gave me this." Her hand trembled as she held it out. She said, "Rosa, if he ever comes looking with honest eyes, give him this." "Not before." He took it. The paper was light. The handwriting was hers. A street, a number, a city he had driven past 10,000 times without ever turning into it. His fist closed around it. A small hand settled on his forearm. "Daddy." He looked down at his daughter. "Are we going to find Mommy?" For the first time in 5 years, something opened in his chest that was not grief. "Yes, baby." His voice was almost a whisper. "We are going to find her." Out in the hallway, beyond the cracked seam of the door, the soft swish of silk withdrew. The faint click of heels carried itself down the corridor, careful and unhurried. Around the corner, out of sight, Vivian Ashford stopped walking. She slid her phone from the small pocket at her hip and pressed it to her ear. Her free hand braced against the wall. "Daddy," she said quietly, "we have a problem." The marble dining room was quiet when Damien came down. The tall windows had been opened a finger's width, and the early city air drifted in along with the smell of espresso and warm bread. At the head of the long table, Salvatore Castellano sat alone with his small white cup, the morning paper folded beside it. The light caught the silver of his hair and the long pale scar that ran from beneath his ear to his collar, a scar Damien had grown up looking at without ever asking about. Salvatore raised his eyes as his son entered. He took in the suit, the tight set of the jaw, the wooden box held in one hand against his thigh. Nothing in his face moved. He was a man who had survived 3 decades at the head of this family precisely because nothing in his face had ever needed to. "Sit down, Damien." His voice was low and even. "We need to talk about your behavior with Vivian." Damien did not sit. He crossed the long room in silence, his footsteps muffled on the carpet, then sharp on the marble at the table's edge. He set the box down between them, on the polished stone, just to the side of his father's coffee cup. The silver spoon in Salvatore's hand stopped moving. His knuckles whitened around it. "That was all. You told me Maya died, Father." The room went still. "Why?" Salvatore set the spoon down beside the saucer, very carefully, as though laying it on a fault line. "Because as far as our family is concerned, she did." Damien's fist came down on the marble. The cup jumped. Black coffee poured itself across the tablecloth, soaked into linen, ran toward the box, and Damien snatched it back, holding it tight against his side as though even the spill might claim it. For a moment neither man spoke. In the silence, Salvatore's eyes drifted somewhere past his son's shoulder, somewhere far older than this house. Damien had seen that look before, only twice in his life, and never long enough to name it. He saw it now, and understood it at last. He had heard the story in pieces over the years. A bar in Harlem in the early 60s. A partner who had taken everything, who had set Antonio Castellano up to walk into a room he never walked out of. A boy of 12 standing in the doorway, watching his father bleed onto the floorboards while a man he had called uncle wiped his hands on a bar towel and left through the back. Damien had grown up with the silhouette of that night without ever being shown the photograph. Salvatore came back to himself. "They killed your grandfather, Damien. I watched him die. I will not let our blood mix with theirs. Not in my lifetime. Not in my house." Damien looked at his father, and for the first time he saw the wound under the cruelty. He understood it. He did not forgive it. "Maya is not them, Father. He kept his voice low. She is not the men who killed Grandpa. She is a woman who held our daughter and sang to her. She is a nurse who pulled a bullet out of me. You know that. You always knew. She would have made you weak. Salvatore's voice did not rise. It never did. She would have made our family weak. I did what a father does. What did you do to her? His father did not answer. What did you do to her? Salvatore stood. He laid his napkin beside the spilled cup with the deliberateness of a man closing a ledger. This conversation is over. Your engagement to Vivienne stands. Damien laughed. Once, and the sound was not pleasant. You think I will still marry her after this? You will. Salvatore turned toward the door. Because if you do not, the Ashford alliance breaks. And without it, the Russians will swallow us whole before the year is out. You are not a boy in love anymore, Damien. You are the boss of this family. Act like it. He walked out. Damien stood alone in the long room with the box pressed against his ribs and his hands still trembling around it. The coffee bled slowly across the white cloth, dark and wide. Footsteps came up behind him. Quiet. Careful, boss, Tony's voice. Vivienne just left in a hurry. She made a phone call from the front gate. I couldn't hear it. I don't like it. Damien did not turn. Bring the car around. His voice had cleared. We are going to Roxbury, and take the car seat from the second garage. Sophie is coming with us. He moved toward the staircase. The box was steady in his hand now. The black armored Cadillac rolled out through the gates of the Beacon Hill estate just before 9. Damien drove himself. He had not done that in years, but today he could not bear another man's hands on the wheel. Sophie sat in the back in the booster seat Tony had pulled from storage, still in her pajamas under a small wool coat, her hair brushed once by Rosa's nervous fingers. The silver bracelet was wound twice around her left wrist with a strip of cloth to keep it from sliding. She had not let go of it since the bedroom. Rosa sat in the passenger seat, the wooden box on her lap. 20 minutes south, that was all. 20 minutes between the polished brick of Mount Vernon Street and the streets where the trees grew thinner and the houses leaned a little toward each other. 2 worlds. Damien had driven the perimeter of Roxbury 100 times on business. He had never crossed into it. Not in 5 years. Not since he had let himself believe Maya was a closed chapter rather than a question. He cleared his throat. Sophie. Yes, Daddy. Mommy was a nurse. A good one. His voice did not sound like his own. She saved my life once. I had been hurt, and she pulled the bullet out herself. She did not flinch. She used to say doctors get too much credit and nurses do too much work. In the rearview mirror, Sophie tilted her head, listening. She sang. Always. In the kitchen. In the car. When you cried, she sang. Did she sing to me, Daddy? He had not been ready for that question. He felt it land low in his chest. Yes, the song came back to him before he meant for it to. A small kitchen, a colicky baby on his shoulder. Maya beside him at 3 a.m. with flour still on her wrist from earlier in the day, half asleep, half humming. When the night has come, and the land is dark, she had a low voice. It carried. Sophie would calm at the second line every time, as though her body knew it. He hummed a few notes, then a few words. His voice cracked on Darling. Darling, stand by me, and he had to stop. In the back seat, very softly, Sophie said, Daddy, I think I remember her singing. In my dreams sometimes. He could not answer her. He kept his eyes on the road. The phone in the cup holder buzzed. Tony. Vivienne called Richard Ashford from the gate. Confirmed. Damien picked up, one hand on the wheel. Double the men at the house, he said. I want 4 on my father's door. No one in or out without my voice on the line. I don't care if it's the cardinal. Confirm. Confirmed, boss. He set the phone down. Rosa glanced sideways at him and said nothing. 2 more turns. The GPS spoke once. He silenced it. The house was small and pale blue, set back from the street behind a low chain-link fence. A wooden porch ran along the front. A swing hung at one end. The chains slightly rusted, moving an inch in the morning breeze. He pulled to the curb and killed the engine. For a long moment, he did not move. Rosa, he spoke without turning his head. What if she doesn't want to see me? What if she hates me? Rosa's hand settled briefly on his sleeve. Then you deserve it, Mr. Damien. But she still deserves to see her daughter. Behind them, the click of a seatbelt. Daddy, I want to go now. He got out. He opened her door and lifted her down himself. They walked up the short path together, Damien holding Sophie's hand, Rosa half a step behind with the box. The porch boards creaked. On the swing, an old woman sat with a thick paperback open in her lap and a pair of reading glasses perched at the end of her nose, brown skin warmed by the morning sun. white hair pulled into a soft knot. She looked up over the rims of her glasses. Her eyes narrowed once, the way eyes narrow when a long-held thing is being recognized. Then, slowly, she stood. Lord have mercy. Her voice was quiet and clear. The day finally came. Damien's throat closed. He forced the words out anyway. Is Maya here? Is she still alive? Mama June did not answer him at first. Her eyes had moved to Sophie, and they stayed there a long time, traveling slowly over the small face turned up toward her. Tears welled and spilled without warning. Child, she lifted a wrinkled hand to her own mouth. You got your mama's eyes. Lord, you got her exact eyes. Sophie let go of her father's hand and walked forward without being told. She wrapped both small arms around the old woman's leg and pressed her cheek to the rough cotton of her dress. Mama June laid her hand on Sophie's head as though it were a thing she had been waiting half a decade to do. Then she lifted her gaze to Damien, and the warmth left her face by degrees. She nodded toward the screen door. Inside the house was small, worn floral couch, a knit blanket folded on its arm, a wooden cross above the kitchen doorway, the smell of coffee and old books. Above the fireplace, in a thin silver frame, was a photograph of Sophie at 1 year old in a yellow dress, laughing at someone outside the frame. Damien stopped walking when he saw it. Mama June saw him stop. Maya works at a clinic 2 streets down. Her voice was even. She'll be home at 6. You can sit. You can wait. She turned and looked at him directly. But Damien Castellano, you better have something real to say. 6 o'clock came slowly. The afternoon had moved through Mama June's small living room the way afternoons did in houses that knew how to wait. Sophie ate a peanut butter sandwich at the kitchen table. Rosa sat very still on the floral couch with her hands folded in her lap. Damien did not sit at all. He stood near the front window for most of it, a little to the side of the curtain, the way a man stood when he had been watching streets all his life. Mama June left him to it. She had decided, sometime around the 3rd hour, that she would judge him by what happened when the door opened, not before. The key turned in the lock at 6 minutes past 6. The door pushed open. A pair of white sneakers crossed the threshold, then the dark blue scrubs above them, then the long arms reaching up to slip the worn nurse's jacket from the shoulders. Maya Brooks stepped inside her grandmother's house and froze. She was thinner than the woman in the photograph. The curls were the same, longer now, pulled back from her face with a clip. The shadows beneath her eyes had been earned slowly. The jacket hung from one shoulder. Her keys were still in her hand. Damien stood up out of the armchair. He did not step toward her. His hand moved once at his side, the way it moved before a draw, and then went still. Maya's eyes went from him to the small girl who had risen quietly from her seat at the table. Sophie stood beside Mama June now, both small hands clasped in front of her stomach. The bracelet caught the lamplight on her wrist. Maya's keys hit the floor. Her jacket slid down her arm and pooled at her feet. One hand came up to her mouth. Sophie? Her voice broke on the second syllable. Sophie did not run. She looked up at Maya with the same careful brown eyes she used when she was trying to understand a grown-up word, and her lower lip moved once. Mommy? Maya sank down to her knees on the worn rug. She did not call her daughter. She opened her arms and she waited, and she let the child come to her in her own time. Damien did not know whose mercy that was, hers or Sophie's, but he understood watching it that he was witnessing something he had no right to interrupt. Sophie crossed the room slowly. When she reached Maya, she lifted her wrist and held it out. The silver heart turned toward her mother's face. Did you give me this? Maya broke into the kind of crying that did not make sound. She nodded once, then again, then pulled her child into her chest and held on. Yes, baby. Before you were born. Damien stayed where he was. He had not earned a step closer. Rosa pressed her knuckles to her mouth on the couch. After a long time, Maya raised her face from Sophie's hair. Her eyes found his across the room. Everything in them closed. Why are you here, Damien? He had rehearsed sentences for hours. None of them came. He lifted the wooden box from where it sat on the side table beside him and held it out as though that were an answer. Sophie found this. Under my bed. He swallowed. Maya. I never read your letter. Not all of it. I never knew. A bitter sound escaped her. Half laugh, half something worse. After 5 years, you finally read it. My father lied to me. His voice held, but barely. He told Sophie you were dead. He told me you ran away with Marcus. Maya's whole body went still. Marcus. She said it as though the name were the cruelest part. Damien. Marcus is my foster brother. I know. He could hardly say it. I know now. She turned her face away from him and wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. When she spoke again, her voice had pulled itself back behind a door he had not yet been invited through. I am not ready to talk to you. Not today. I understand. He paused. But Sophie... Maya looked down at the small head still pressed against her shoulder. Her arm tightened. Sophie can stay. As long as she wants. He nodded once. He took a step back, not forward. I will come back tomorrow, if you allow. She did not answer. He took it for what it was. He moved past them carefully, the way a man moved through a room of glass. He crouched in front of his daughter and laid one hand against her cheek. Daddy will pick you up later, sweetheart. Be good with Mommy. Sophie threw her arms around his neck. Hard. Daddy, don't leave me here forever. He kissed her forehead. He kissed it twice. Never. I promise. He straightened. He did not look at Maya again. He walked out of the small living room and closed the door behind him with both hands. In the Cadillac, he sat with his hands on the wheel for a long time without starting the engine. Almost 10 minutes. The phone buzzed against his thigh. Tony, boss, Vivienne is at the mansion. She is furious. She is asking where you are. Let her ask. He hung up. He started the car. In the rearview mirror, the small blue house grew smaller. The porch swing was moving in the early evening wind, slow and steady. For the first time in 5 years, Damien Castellano had the unfamiliar, unmistakable sense that he had just done something right. By the time Damien returned to Beacon Hill, it was almost midnight, and Vivienne Ashford was still in the front parlor. She had not changed since morning. The white silk dress had wrinkled along one hip from where she had been pacing for hours, the diamond at her throat dull now under the lamplight. Salvatore sat in the leather wingback by the unlit fireplace, a glass of Macallan in his hand, his other hand pressed to his temple. Vivienne saw the headlights through the front window and turned on her heel. Salvatore. Her voice had risen past sweet. You promised me Damien would forget her. The old man did not look up from his glass. I thought I had taken care of it. His voice was tired. The woman is resilient. Resilient. Vivienne laughed, and the sound was thin. She is a threat. He went to Roxbury today. Salvatore. Roxbury. He drove himself. He took the child. Damien needs time. Salvatore lifted the glass. The wedding will still happen. He understands the alliance. He understands what breaks if it does not. She stared at him. She had grown up in rooms like this one, watched men her father's age console themselves with the same line of thought year after year, watched them lose because they believed too long in the things that had once been true. She did not believe Damien needed time. She had seen his face this morning when he closed the bedroom door on her. A man who needed time did not look at his fiancée the way one looked at a piece of furniture about to be removed. She picked up her purse without another word. The Aston Martin was already on the gravel. She drove herself, foot heavy, the night air streaming through the cracked window, pulling strands of pinned hair loose against her face. The Ashford estate sat 15 miles north along the coast, behind its own iron gates, and her father was waiting in the drawing room with the lamps turned low. Richard Ashford was 62 and looked 50. He had a careful, banker's face that hid the fact that he had buried more men than most cemeteries. Tell me. He did not stand. The alliance is in danger. She set her purse down with a hard click. Damien wants the black girl back. Richard's brows drew together by a fraction. That woman from Roxbury, I thought she was gone. She is back. And worse, father. She let the silence pull tight. There is a child. Richard set his glass down on the side table. His face did not move at all. That, she had learned as a girl, was what he did when he was deciding something final. What do you want me to do, my dear? Vivienne smiled. It was a small, careful smile, the kind she had perfected at 16. Make her disappear, for real this time. The next morning was bright and cold. Damien drove south again, alone, with a small bouquet of white tulips on the passenger seat and a brown teddy bear in a paper bag on the floor. Maya met him at the screen door in a long cardigan, arms folded across her chest. She did not invite him in. She nodded at the porch. Sophie was already on the rug in the living room with Mama June, building something out of plastic blocks and serious commentary. Damien set the bear inside the door. Maya took the tulips without thanking him and did not look at them. They sat on the porch swing. There was a foot of space between them. She did not move to close it. I had a heart problem after giving birth, she said. Her voice was level. Postpartum cardiomyopathy. I was on medication for 2 years. When your father threatened me, I could not fight him in court. He had everything. Money, lawyers, a name. I had a hospital bill and a baby. I would have fought him. She turned her head slowly and looked at him. Would you? She did not raise her voice. Or would you have hesitated, just for one moment? Because that one moment would have cost me Sophie forever. He bowed his head. The question went through him without finding any wall to stop it. He told me the only way to keep Sophie safe was to leave. He told me you would believe whatever he said. And you did, didn't you, Damien? He could not deny it. I'm sorry, Maya. He had said the words 1,000 times in his head on the drive down, and they came out smaller than he had hoped. I should have looked harder. I should have searched every street in this city. She watched him for a long time. There was no forgiveness in her face. There was no hatred either, and that was the only mercy she was offering him today. Trust takes time, Damien. Don't rush me. Across the street, 2 cars down, a black SUV sat at the curb with its engine off and its windows tinted dark. Damien did not see it as he stood and walked back to his Cadillac. The driver inside lifted a phone to his ear and said 3 words. That night, long after Damien's taillights had vanished from the block, a thin figure in a hooded jacket stepped out from the alley behind Mama June's small blue house and began to walk, slow and quiet, toward the kitchen window. Sophie had asked to stay the night, and Maya had not been able to say no. By 10, the small blue house had gone quiet. Mama June had taken her tea and her arthritis pills and gone to bed an hour earlier. The door to her room closed against the hallway light. Sophie lay tucked under a quilt in Maya's old childhood bedroom upstairs, the silver bracelet still wound around her wrist. One small hand curled beneath her cheek. Maya sat on the edge of the bed in the half-dark, watching the rise and fall of her daughter's breathing, half afraid the moment she looked away the child would dissolve. She had not slept properly in 5 years. She did not expect to sleep tonight either. A few minutes past 11, she heard it. A small, bright sound from the back of the house. Glass, not a glass falling, glass cracking. She went still. A second later, the soft scrape of a sash sliding up. Maya did not stop to think. She lifted Sophie from the bed in a single careful motion, blanket and all, and stepped out of the room with her child against her chest. She moved down the hallway on bare feet, past the cross above the kitchen doorway, and slipped into the bathroom at the end of the hall. She lowered Sophie into the deep linen cabinet under the sink, between 2 stacks of folded towels. The child stirred, blinking up at her. "Mommy, stay here." Maya's voice was barely a breath. "Don't make a sound, baby. Mommy will be right back. Hold the bracelet." She pulled the cabinet door shut and turned around. On the small console table in the hall stood a heavy green ceramic vase, the one Mama June had carried with her through 3 different houses. Maya lifted it off in both hands. She pressed herself flat against the wall just inside the bathroom door and waited. She heard the floorboards in the kitchen first, then the dining room, then a slow, careful step into the hall. She let him pass. She brought the vase down on the back of his head with everything in her. The ceramic burst. The man staggered. He went down to one knee and pressed a gloved hand to his temple, swaying. Maya bolted. She made it to the living room. The cordless was on the side table. She grabbed it, hit 9, hit 1. He was already on his feet. He caught her wrist before she could press the second one and twisted, and the phone clattered across the rug. He had a knife. She saw it as the lamplight caught the blade. She turned her shoulder into him and shoved, and the edge sliced across her forearm, a hot white line that opened her sleeve in a long red stripe. She did not feel it yet. She kicked at him, scrambled backward over the arm of the couch. The front door blew open. Damien Castellano came through it with his Beretta already up, both hands on the grip. He did not say a word. He fired once. The man jerked, crumpled forward over the coffee table. Damien stepped fully into the room and brought the muzzle down to the back of the man's skull. The intruder rolled and threw himself toward the kitchen. The leg dragged. He hit the back door and was through it before Damien could reset. Gone into the dark of the alley behind the house. Damien did not chase him. He turned to her instead. Maya. She was on the floor against the bookshelf, holding her cut arm. Her chest was heaving. Sophie. She managed the word. Where? Bathroom. Cabinet. He moved fast. She heard the cabinet door open at the end of the hall. Heard her daughter cry out in relief. Heard Damien's low voice say, "Come here. Sweetheart, come on." He came back into the living room with Sophie on one hip, his other hand still loose around the gun. Sophie saw her mother in the blood and threw herself across the rug into Maya's lap. Maya wrapped her good arm around her and finally let the shake come. She lifted her face to Damien. "Why?" she whispered. "Why were you here?" "I had men watching the house from across the street." He lowered himself to one knee in front of her. "I never stopped worrying. I have not stopped since the morning Sophie found that box." Maya pressed her cheek against her daughter's hair. Her voice was unsteady. "Who did this?" "Damien. Who did this? I am going to find out. Tonight, He stepped to the side and made a single call. Tony picked up before the second ring. Damien spoke in clipped, low sentences. Vivian's name was not said aloud, but it was in the spaces between every word. Mama June appeared in the hallway in her robe, gray and trembling. Damien crossed to her, took her hand, and explained in 3 sentences. She nodded once, asked no questions, and went to pack a bag. By midnight they were in the back of a black sedan, moving west out of Roxbury toward Brookline. The safe house was a brick colonial on a quiet street. Blinds already down, 2 of Damien's men on the porch. Sophie slept between Damien and Maya in the back seat, her head against her mother's shoulder, her bracelet catching the streetlights as they passed. Maya's bandaged arm rested across the child's lap. The city moved by outside the tinted glass. "Damien," Maya whispered. "Yes, I'm scared." He looked at her in the dim. He did not reach for her. "I will never let anyone touch you again. I swear on Sophie's life." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then she looked down at their daughter, at the small, steady breath against her collarbone. She slid her hand across the seat. She laid it on his. Just for 1 second. It was enough. 12 miles east, on Beacon Hill, Vivian Ashford was standing in her bathroom when her phone lit up with 3 words from a voice she had paid a great deal of money to never hear. "She is gone." She read the message twice. Then she drew her arm back and drove her fist into the mirror. The glass split into 100 bright fractures. Her knuckles opened. Blood ran down the marble in a slow, dark line. She did not move. 2 days passed inside the brick colonial on the quiet Brookline street, and for the first time in 5 years, Damien Castellano slept with his daughter in the next room and the woman he had loved under the same roof. He did not sleep much, but he slept. He cooked breakfast on the second morning, eggs and toast and bacon, and burned the bacon, and Sophie laughed at him in a way that almost split him in half. Maya stood in the doorway in one of his old t-shirts and a pair of borrowed sweatpants, her bandaged arm cradled against her stomach, watching them. She did not smile much, but she did not leave the doorway either. In the afternoons he read to Sophie on the couch. Maya curled in the armchair across from them with a cup of tea and listened. Once, in the middle of a chapter, he looked up and caught her watching him over the rim of the cup, and she did not look away. In the evenings, after Sophie had gone to sleep in the upstairs bedroom, they talked. She told him about Roxbury, about the second name she had used at the clinic, Maya Bell, taken from the Bible Mama June had given her, about sleeping with the lights on for the first 18 months, about the night Sophie had spiked a fever of 104, and Maya had run 6 blocks with her in her arms because the car would not start, and how she had thought the whole way that if her daughter died on that sidewalk it would be Damien's fault, not hers, and that she would never tell him so. He told her about the nights he had woken up calling her name, about the bottle of whiskey he kept in the desk drawer, about the year he had not gone into Sophie's room at bedtime because he could not look at her without seeing Maya's eyes. Maya did not forgive him, but she stopped, somewhere along the second night, sitting on the kitchen counter at 1 a.m, putting a bag of frozen peas against the bruise on her elbow. It was on the 3rd afternoon that Sophie wanted ice cream. There was a small shop 2 blocks down. Maya wanted air. The 2 guards Tony had assigned them walked a half step behind. The street was bright and ordinary, and Sophie skipped the whole way there, the silver bracelet catching the sun. The woman with the doll was waiting on the bench outside the shop. She looked like a tired young mother. A pretty cardigan, sensible shoes, a stuffed animal in her lap. She smiled at Sophie when they came out with their cones and held the doll out. "Oh, sweetie, do you like dolls? My niece left this here yesterday. You can have it." Maya pulled Sophie back by the shoulder before the small hand could close around it. "No, thank you." Her voice was sharp. The guard on her left took a step forward. The woman shrugged, smiled, and stood up. She brushed past them on her way down the sidewalk. Her sleeve drifted, just for a second, over the rim of Sophie's strawberry cone. They were almost back at the Colonial when Sophie said her stomach felt funny. By the time they reached the front door, she was retching onto the front lawn. Maya screamed for Damien. He came through the front door with his phone already in his hand. The car was running in 2 minutes. Mass General was 20 minutes away. He made it in 12. A pediatric ER doctor took 1 look at Sophie's pupils and pulled blood. The results were back in under an hour. It's a controlled substance, mixed with something that causes vomiting. She kept her voice low so Sophie, half asleep on the gurney, would not hear. Whoever did this knew the dose. They wanted to hurt her, not kill her. Yet, Damien did not speak. He left the room. He walked down the long fluorescent hallway and around the corner, and he drove his fist into the painted concrete wall. The skin over his knuckles split. He did not feel it. Tony was already there. He had Damien's coat over one arm and a tablet in the other hand. "Boss." His voice was low. "The woman with the doll. We pulled her off a security camera at the corner. She works for Vivian Ashford. We have her now. She's in the back of the van." Damien turned slowly. There was nothing in his face. "Bring her to the warehouse. Now." Behind him, footsteps. Light ones. Maya stopped a foot away. He heard the air leave her chest in a small, uneven sound. Then her arms came around him from behind, slow, careful of the cut still healing on her own forearm, her cheek pressed flat against the back of his shoulder. She had not touched him voluntarily in 5 years. "Don't kill her, Damien." Her voice was muffled against the wool of his jacket. "That won't bring back what we lost." He turned in her arms. He looked down at her. He saw the dark hollows under her eyes, and the blood from his hand on her sleeve, and the woman she had become carrying their daughter alone for half a decade. He bent his head and pressed his lips to her forehead. It was not a kiss for her mouth. It was something older than that. Something he had not earned the right to yet. "I won't kill her." His voice was rough. "But I will end her." A small voice came from the open doorway behind them. "Mommy." They went in. Sophie was awake, propped up against 2 pillows, the IV taped to the back of her small hand. She looked up at Damien with serious brown eyes that were too tired to cry. "Daddy." The lady with the doll wasn't nice. He sat on the edge of the bed. He lifted her free hand and pressed his lips to her knuckles. "Daddy will make sure she never comes near you again." By 8 o'clock that night, Damien Castellano was driving back through the iron gates of the Beacon Hill estate, alone, with both hands tight on the wheel. Vivian Ashford was inside. He had been told. The front parlor was warm with low lamplight when Damien stepped through the double doors. A fire had been laid in the hearth, the kind Salvatore liked even in early autumn. His father sat in the wingback nearest the flames with a glass of red wine in one hand. Vivienne was on the velvet settee across from him, in a dark green dress she had not been wearing this morning. A cut crystal tumbler of bourbon balanced on her knee. The right side of her hand was wrapped in a thin white bandage. She looked up when he came in. She had arranged her face into mild, wifely concern. "Damien, darling." She rose. "You've been gone all day. I was beginning to worry." Salvatore raised his eyes over the rim of his glass. "You look terrible, Damien. Sit down. Have a drink." Damien did not sit. He crossed to the long inlaid table beneath the window and dropped a manila envelope onto the wood. He pulled 3 photographs from it and laid them out one by one. Vivian's bodyguard outside Mass General, the young woman with the doll on the bench in Brookline, a grainy still from the alley behind Mama June's blue house, taken by one of Tony's men 2 nights ago, the same hooded figure Damien had put a bullet into. "Vivienne." His voice was very calm. "Explain these." The color left her cheeks. She held her smile for a second longer than her face wanted to. "Darling, I don't know what you're talking about." He set a small black recorder beside the photographs. He pressed play. A woman's voice came out of the speaker. Tinny, but clear. Tony had spent the afternoon making sure of that. "The dose has to make her sick. Do you understand me? Sick enough to land her in a hospital bed. Damien needs to remember what it feels like to nearly lose a child. The mother takes the next round." The voice was Vivian's. Salvatore's wineglass stopped halfway to his mouth. "Vivian." His voice had gone strange. "You tried to harm a child. My granddaughter." Vivian's mask cracked. "She is not your granddaughter." The words came out before she could stop them, low and ugly. "She is the daughter of that black nurse. She does not get to live in this house. She does not get to inherit this name." Salvatore set his glass down on the side table. His hand was unsteady. He stood up slowly, the way an old man stands when something inside him has shifted and he has not yet figured out where the new weight goes. "She has my blood, Vivian." His voice was thinner than Damien had ever heard it. "She is a Castellano." Damien did not look at his father. He kept his eyes on Vivian. "Get out of my house, Vivian. The engagement is broken." She laughed. It was a sharp, frightened sound. "You cannot. My father will destroy you. Do you understand what you are doing? He will burn every business you own. He will put your men in the ground. Let him try." She crossed the room in 3 strides and slapped him. He did not move. He did not raise a hand. He simply caught her wrist as it came down for a second blow, and held it lightly, almost gently, as though she were something he did not wish to break. Tony. Tony had been standing in the open doorway since the recording began. 4 men stood in the foyer behind him. "Escort Miss Ashford out." She tried to pull free. Tony's hand closed around her elbow with the practiced courtesy of a man who had been removing problems from this house for 20 years. He did not hurt her. He did not need to. At the threshold, she looked back over her shoulder. Her eyes were wet, but they were not soft. They were the eyes of an animal that had just learned the door behind it had locked. "You will regret this, Damien. So will she. So will the child." He did not answer her. He closed the doors behind her himself. The lock turned with a heavy sound. The room went very quiet. Salvatore had not moved from his place by the fire. His hand was braced against the back of the wingback chair. He looked across the rug at his son, and in that moment he looked 10 years older than he had at breakfast. "Damien." The word cracked. "What have I done?" Damien turned. He looked at his father. There was no pity in his face. There was no rage left either. The rage had burned through him hours ago in a hospital hallway with a child vomiting on a gurney. What remained was something colder and clearer than rage, and Salvatore felt it land. "You let your wound become Sophie's wound, father." He kept his voice level. "And Maya's, and mine, for 5 years." Salvatore lowered himself back into the chair. His shoulders began to shake. Damien watched, not unkindly, but without moving, as the boss of the Castellano family, the man who had buried 2 brothers and a wife and 3 soldiers without a tear, put both hands over his face and cried into them. After a long minute, Salvatore lifted his head. His face was wet. "Bring them to the house, Damien. I want to meet her. The girl, my granddaughter, properly, before I die, please." Damien held his father's eyes. "Maybe, one day, after this is over." He paused. "But you will have to earn it, father." He walked out of the parlor without waiting for an answer. In the hall, he lifted the phone to his ear. "Tony, wake the capos. All of them. We are going to war." The first night after Vivienne was put out of the house, Boston went quiet in the wrong way. The kind of quiet a man like Damien recognized before the rest of the city did. 24 hours later, the quiet broke. A Castellano warehouse in Charlestown went up in flames a few minutes before midnight. The fire department was kept back at the perimeter for almost an hour by a series of small explosions inside. By 2 a.m, 3 blocks south of Fenway, one of Damien's senior capos was found shot twice in the chest in the parking lot behind a steakhouse he had eaten at every Tuesday for 15 years. Richard Ashford had answered. By 3, Tony was at the front gate of the Beacon Hill estate with every capo who could be reached by phone. They came in dark coats, eyes still half asleep, hands on their belts. They filled the long study off the foyer the way they had not filled it since Damien's uncle was buried. Damien stood at the head of the room in his shirt sleeves, the holster visible against the white cotton. He spoke for 12 minutes. He named the streets they would lose first if they did not move. He named the soldiers each capo would put on each block. He named 4 men he wanted dead by Friday and 3 more he wanted only watched. The men listened the way men listened when they understood that the words being spoken would not be repeated. When he was done, he turned to Tony. "Get my family to the Cape, tonight." Maya did not argue when he came up the stairs of the safe house in Brookline at 4 a.m. and told her to wake Sophie. She did not ask questions when he carried Sophie's small bag down himself and set it in the trunk. She had become, in 2 days, a woman who could read his face the way she had once read it across a small kitchen. Mama June stayed in Brookline with 2 of Tony's men. She was too tired for another move, and she said so. She kissed Sophie's forehead and told her to be brave for her mother. The drive to Cape Cod took 90 minutes in the dark. Sophie sat in the middle of the back seat between her parents and her booster, wrapped in the blanket from the safe house. The brown teddy bear pressed to her chest. Halfway down 3, Maya finally spoke. "Damien, how dangerous is this really?" He did not lie to her. He had decided, sometime back at the mansion, that he was finished lying to her about anything ever again. "Very. Richard has been waiting for an excuse like this for years." She nodded slowly. She did not flinch. Sophie shifted against the bear. Her small voice came up between them. "Will Grandpa Salvatore be safe too?" Damien's hands tightened on the wheel. His daughter had spent precisely 1 Christmas in the same room as Salvatore Castellano. That man had patted her head twice in his life, and called her little girl without warmth. And here she was at 4 a.m, asking after him. "I hope so, baby." The cottage at the Cape was a low cedar-shingled house set on a quiet stretch of beach in Truro. 2 of his men checked every room before any of them stepped inside. 12 more were spread across the dunes and the property line. The front gate was new. The motion sensors were newer. That night, after Sophie had been put to bed in the upstairs bedroom that smelled of old salt and laundry soap, Damien and Maya sat on the back porch with a single light burning above the door. The Atlantic moved in slow black sheets in front of them. Maya wrapped both hands around her mug. She did not look at him. "I never stopped loving you, Damien." Her voice was level. "But I had to learn to live without you. And I did. I know I don't deserve a second chance. It is not about deserving." She turned her face toward him at last. "It is about whether the world will let us." He reached across the small space between their chairs and laid his hand over hers on the mug. He did not lace his fingers through. He just covered her knuckles. She did not pull away. They sat like that for a long time. The waves spoke for them. Eventually he told her about the whiskey in the desk drawer, about the year he could not enter Sophie's bedroom at bedtime, about the night, 2 years in, when he had driven 4 hours to a town in upstate New York because he thought he had seen Maya's face in a photograph of a hospital fundraiser, and it had turned out to be a stranger. She told him about the night after she moved to Roxbury when her heart had given out in Mama June's kitchen, and how the EMTs had said 1 more minute and Sophie would have grown up an orphan. The horizon began to gray. He stood. He had to be on the road by 6. Maya rose with him. He cupped the side of her face with one hand. He bent his head, slowly, the way a man bent toward a thing he had not been allowed to touch in 5 years, and he kissed her. It was not an old kiss. It was new, careful, very quiet. She made a small sound against his mouth and kissed him back. Tears slid sideways down her cheeks. "I will come back," he said. "I promise." Small bare feet hit the porch boards behind them. Sophie threw her arms around his leg. "Daddy, please don't get hurt." He crouched. He kissed the crown of her head. "Daddy is the one who hurts other people, sweetheart. But I will be careful." He drove out of Truro at 6. In the rearview mirror, Maya stood on the porch with Sophie pressed against her hip, both of them watching until the car turned at the end of the road. By 9, he was back in the parlor on Beacon Hill. Salvatore was already up. He was dressed. He had a Colt holstered under his jacket, an old one, the one he had carried in his 30s. "Let me help, Damien." His voice was rough. "Let me make this right." Damien looked at him for a long moment. Stay at the mansion. Defensive only. That night, far down the dark stretch of Cape Cod Beach, beyond the line of dunes, a small, unlit boat slipped its engine into neutral and drifted in toward the sand on the tide. At 3 in the morning, Maya woke to a sound that did not belong on the Cape. It was not the surf. The surf had been moving against the dunes for hours, and her body had stopped hearing it the way a body stops hearing a clock. This was something else. A short, wet sound at the back of the property. Then nothing. Then a second sound just like it, closer to the porch. She sat up. She had not undressed. She was still in jeans and one of Damien's old sweatshirts. Sophie was sleeping curled against her hip on the wide guest room bed, her bracelet bright against the white sheet. Maya laid her hand on her daughter's back. "Sophie, wake up, baby. Wake up." Quietly. Sophie blinked once. Maya lifted her in one motion, blanket and all, and stepped barefoot to the bedroom door. The hallway was dark. Down at the far end, she could see a thin sliver of moonlight under the porch door, and across that sliver, a silent shadow moved. She did not breathe. She turned the other way and crossed the hall to the small reading room. The reading room had only one door. She pushed it shut behind her, turned the knob lock, and pulled the heavy oak desk against it inch by inch. There was a tall built-in bookcase against the back wall, the bottom shelf wide and deep, big enough for a small child curled tight. She knelt and pulled out the lower books in 2 armfuls. "Sophie, listen to me. You are going to climb in here." "Mommy, what is happening?" "Bad men, baby. Listen. No matter what happens, no matter what you hear, you stay quiet. Do you understand me? You do not come out for any voice except mine or Daddy's." "Mommy, I'm scared." Maya gathered her daughter's face in both hands and kissed her forehead hard. "I know, baby, I know. Mommy is going to fight for you. Hold the bracelet. Mommy gave you that bracelet for moments like this. Squeeze it tight." Sophie squeezed. Maya could see her small knuckles go white around the silver heart. She lifted Sophie into the cavity and pulled 2 heavier books back across the front, leaving only the slimmest gap. She had just stood up when the gunfire started in the hallway. 2 of Damien's men. 3, maybe 4. The dull crack of suppressed weapons and then the heavier answering shots from the men in the house. Glass broke somewhere near the kitchen. A body hit the floor. The reading room door took 2 kicks before the lock split. The desk slid back 6 inches on the runner. A boot drove through the gap. 3 men in dark clothing pushed inside. Rifles already up. Maya picked up the brass lamp from the side table. She got 1 good swing in. The first man went down hard. The second caught her wrist on the upswing and twisted, and her arm went numb to the elbow. The third hooked an arm under her chin from behind and hauled her off her feet. She did not scream. She did not give the bookcase the gift of her eyes. The lead man straightened, blood on his temple. His voice was flat. "Where's the kid?" "She is not here." Maya forced the words out around the arm at her throat. "I sent her ahead. She left an hour ago with one of his men. He looked at her. He hit her across the face with the back of his hand. Then he turned. He swept the bookcase with his eyes. He crossed to it in 3 steps and pulled the heavy books off the bottom shelf in a single sweep. Sophie was curled into herself with both small hands pressed over her mouth. "Please," Maya whispered. The man reached in. They were dragged out through the kitchen and across the dark sand at a half-run. Somewhere behind them, the cottage was burning at one corner. The boat sat low in the surf with its engine already turning over. 2 more men aboard with rifles. Sophie was passed up first. Maya was thrown in after her. The boat pushed off into the black water and swung hard for the deeper channel. In Boston, Damian Castellano was in the war room on Beacon Hill when his phone rang. He had not slept. He took the call standing. The voice on the other end was one of his own. "Boss." It cracked. "The Cape House is hit. They are gone. Maya and Sophie are gone." Damian did not speak for 2 seconds. When he did, his voice was not his own. Where did they take them? Tony was already at the laptop. He pulled up the small map. 3 months ago, on a quiet Sunday afternoon, Damian had sat on the rug with Sophie and pretended to play with the bracelet's clasp, while threading a chip the size of a grain of rice into the heart charm. The blue dot was moving south down the harbor. It slowed. It stopped. It blinked at a long abandoned warehouse on the South Boston piers. Ashford property. They had owned it for years. "Get me 30 men. Damian was already pulling the holster across his shoulders. Body armor. Heavy. Now. Salvatore was on his feet at the door of the study. His coat over his arm. The old Colt at his hip. "This is my fight too, Damian. I made this mess. Stay behind me, father. I mean it." Inside the warehouse, Maya was tied to a steel chair under a single hanging bulb. Sophie sat on a wooden crate at her side, the bracelet still in her fist, tear tracks drying on her cheeks. Maya leaned across the small distance between them and pressed her forehead to her daughter's. "Daddy is coming, baby. Daddy is coming." A door at the far end of the warehouse opened. Vivienne walked in first, in jeans and a dark coat, her bandaged hand at her side. Richard Ashford followed with a glass of bourbon in one hand and a small chrome pistol in the other. Vivienne smiled when she saw the chair. "Look at the happy little family," she laughed, and the laugh was wrong. "Daddy, can I do it myself? After Damian comes." Richard sipped his bourbon. "We need leverage first." Outside, on the dark loading dock, Damian fanned his men into position. He and Salvatore moved together along the side of the building, toward the back service door. Tony took the main entrance with the bulk of the force. Damian gave one short hand signal. The night cracked open with gunfire. He hit the back door at a sprint, weapon up, and saw the room. Maya, Sophie, Vivienne, Richard. Damian moved into the warehouse with his Beretta up and his finger straight along the frame. Salvatore came behind him on his weak side, the old Colt drawn down at his hip. The hanging bulb above the steel chair threw a hard yellow circle across the concrete. Everything outside that circle was black with shadow, and the distant flash of the firefight Tony was running at the front doors. Vivienne saw him first. "Welcome, darling." Her smile was wide and wrong. Just in time. Richard moved without hurry. He stepped behind Sophie's crate, lifted the small chrome pistol, and laid the muzzle against the side of the child's head. Sophie's whole body locked. Her eyes found her father across the warehouse floor. "Daddy." The word was almost a whisper. "Richard." Damian's voice was very quiet and very clear. "Let them go. We can negotiate." Richard laughed once. "Negotiate? After you humiliated my daughter in your own house." Vivienne stepped to Maya's chair. From inside her coat, she drew a slim folding knife and flicked it open. She set the edge against the soft skin under Maya's jaw. "Choose, Damian." Her voice was almost playful. "Your beloved, or your daughter." Damian did not blink. "Touch either of them, and I will kill every person in this room, including myself." He meant it. Vivienne saw that he meant it. The smile thinned. Behind Damian, Salvatore raised the Colt. He did not announce it. He did not steady against a wall. He fired once, clean across the room, and the round took Richard Ashford through the right hand. The chrome pistol went spinning off the crate and skittered into the dark. Sophie was already moving. She came off the crate at a dead run, the bracelet flashing on her wrist, and she did not stop until she hit her father's hip. Damian caught her one-armed against him, kept the Beretta level on Vivienne, and stepped back 2 paces toward the door. Vivienne screamed. She drove the knife forward and down into Maya's shoulder. Maya cried out, a short, hard sound, and her body jerked against the ropes. Blood spread fast through the cotton of the sweatshirt. Damian fired before the scream finished. The round went into Vivian's thigh, and she folded sideways off the chair onto the concrete, the knife clattering away from her hand. The main doors blew off their hinges at the far end of the warehouse. Tony came through with the bulk of the men behind him. The Ashford soldiers on the floor turned to meet them, and the room came apart in muzzle flash and shouting. Damien set Sophie down behind a steel pillar. "Stay there, baby. Do not move." He went forward. Across the floor, Richard Ashford had crawled to the chrome pistol with his good hand. He picked it up left-handed, dragged himself up against a pallet, and brought the gun up. He aimed at Damien. Salvatore saw it from 10 feet away. The old man's body moved before the thought arrived. He threw himself forward across his son's back. In the same instant, Maya's head came up. She had seen Richard raise the gun. She saw the line of the barrel. She saw the old man stepping into it. She had been tied for one arm only. The rope on the right wrist had loosened in the struggle with Vivienne. She tore it free now in a single twist that opened the knife wound wider, and she came up out of the chair. She did not run to her child. She ran to Salvatore. She hit him across the chest with both hands and drove him sideways, and the round meant for Damien's spine took her instead, high on the left shoulder, and went out the back through the meat near her collarbone. She went down hard. Tony's rifle came up, and Richard Ashford's head snapped back, and he did not move again. Maya. Damien was on his knees beside her in 2 heartbeats. His hands were already on the wound. The blood was coming fast. Sophie reached them an instant later, pushing past Salvatore's shoulder, and the small face crumpled. "Mommy! Mommy!" Salvatore Castellano knelt in the spreading red on the concrete. He looked down at the woman lying at his feet, the black nurse he had threatened in his own laundry room 5 years ago. The mother he had told his granddaughter was dead. The woman he had used a lifetime of buried grief to send into exile. She had just put her body between him and a bullet. Why? His voice broke on the single word. He was not the boss of anything anymore. He was an old man on his knees on a warehouse floor. Why? Why did you save me? Maya's lips were pale. There was blood at the corner of her mouth. She looked at him, and somehow, she smiled. Because. Her voice was the thinnest thread. Sophie needs her grandpa, and Damien needs his father. The old man covered his face with both hands and wept, openly, the second time in his life that his son had ever seen him cry. "Stay with me, Maya." Damien pressed both palms hard against the wound. "Stay with me. Stay with me." Tony was on the radio for the ambulance. Sophie unwound the silver bracelet from her wrist with shaking fingers and pressed it into her mother's slack right hand. "Mommy, hold this. It will help." Maya's fingers closed around it. "I love you, Sophie." She was barely audible. "I love you, Damien." Her eyes drifted, her head lolled against Damien's arm. The medics came through the broken doors with a stretcher. Vivian Ashford was put face down in cuffs on the bloody concrete, screaming through her teeth. Richard's body was left where it lay. The Ashford men still standing dropped their weapons within the next 20 minutes. By dawn, Damien Castellano, his daughter, and his father sat side by side in the hard plastic chairs of the surgical waiting room at Mass General, Sophie asleep across Damien's lap, Salvatore staring at the closed double doors with his hands clenched together until the knuckles went white. The waiting room on the 4th floor of Mass General had the kind of fluorescent light that did not flatter anyone. The walls were a pale institutional green, the chairs were bolted to the floor in long rows, and the magazines on the side table were 2 years old. Sophie had finally fallen asleep around the 4th hour. She lay across 2 chairs with her head on Damien's thigh, the blanket from one of the EMTs tucked around her shoulders. Damien sat with one hand resting on her back, feeling her ribs rise and fall under his palm. He had not moved in a long time. Across the narrow aisle, Salvatore Castellano sat with his elbows on his knees and his hands laced together. He had refused coffee. He had refused water. He had refused the doctor who came by with a small dressing for the gash on his forehead, where Damien had pulled him out of the warehouse against the doorframe. 6 hours had passed since the surgical doors closed. "Damien." His father's voice was low. "I need to tell you something." Damien did not look at him. "What?" Salvatore drew a long breath. He held it, then let it out. "Your grandfather, Antonio. The night he died. I have told you the outline of that night 100 times in this house. I have never told you what I actually saw." Damien turned his head slightly. He did not speak. It was 1968, a bar in Harlem on a Tuesday. He had gone to settle a debt with a man he had been doing business with for 9 years. A man named Walker. Black, yes, but mostly a thief, mostly a coward. Salvatore's voice did not rise. The rest of the floor was empty. Somewhere down the hall, a vending machine hummed. He took me with him because he wanted me to learn how a man pays a debt and walks back out. I was 12. I sat at the end of the bar with a bottle of Coca-Cola. Walker shot him in the chest from 6 feet away. He looked at me afterward and decided not to bother. He walked out the back the way he had walked in. I crawled to my father on the floorboards and I held his head until the ambulance came. He was already gone. Sophie shifted in her sleep. Damien's hand smoothed across her back. My mother, Salvatore swallowed. After the funeral, she sat me in a chair in the parlor, and she told me what they had taken from us. She told me what they were. Not Walker. They. For the rest of my childhood, she told me. And I believed her, Damien. I built a man on top of that belief. I have been that man for 56 years. He paused. When you brought Maya home, all I saw was the man at the end of that bar. I did not see her. I refused to see her. Damien finally looked at him. His eyes were steady and dark and not soft. You let one moment of pain become a generation of cruelty, father. Salvatore lowered his head. The tears came down his face without sound. I know. His voice cracked. I know, my son. For a long minute, neither of them spoke. Then Salvatore said, almost to himself, today she saved my life, the woman I tried to destroy. And in that moment, I understood. She is more of a Castellano than I ever was. Damien did not answer. He simply tightened his fingers against Sophie's small back. The child stirred. She rubbed her eyes with both fists and pushed herself up onto her elbow. Daddy, is Mommy okay? He bent and kissed the crown of her head. The doctors are still helping her. Baby. Sophie blinked across the aisle. Her brown eyes settled on Salvatore. Grandpa, are you crying? The old man slid off his chair. He did not lower himself to one knee. He went all the way down, both knees on the linoleum in front of his granddaughter, and he had never knelt for anyone in his life. Not at his own wedding, not at his wife's grave. Sophie, his voice was wrecked. Will you forgive an old man for being foolish? She studied his face for a long moment, with the seriousness only 6-year-old girls can manage. Then she reached out and laid her small hand against his rough cheek. Mommy says everyone makes mistakes, but you have to do better next time. Salvatore broke. His head dropped forward against her small knees and he sobbed, hard. The way old men sob when something they have carried for 50 years finally falls out of their hands and shatters on the floor. The double doors at the end of the corridor opened. A surgeon in pale green scrubs came toward them, pulling the cap from her head. Damien stood. He picked Sophie up onto his hip in the same motion. Salvatore got himself to his feet by gripping the edge of the chair. Mr. Castellano. Mrs. Brooks is stable. She was tired, but her smile was real. The bullet missed the major arteries. We removed it cleanly. She has lost blood and her shoulder will need time, but she is going to be okay. She is awake. She is asking for her family. The word landed in Damien's chest like a stone dropped into still water. Family. The three of them walked the long, bright corridor together. Damien carried Sophie. Salvatore walked a half step behind. The room was quiet. Maya lay propped on 2 pillows, her left arm bound to her chest, her face the color of old paper. When the door opened, she turned her head against the pillow, and her eyes found Sophie first and softened. Mommy. Sophie wriggled out of Damien's arms and went carefully across the linoleum, climbing up on the chair beside the bed without being told. Her small hand slipped into her mother's good one. Maya's gaze moved past her. It found the man standing in the doorway in his rumpled coat, his eyes red, the scar at his collar visible above the loosened tie. Mr. Castellano. Salvatore stepped forward. He did not know what to do with his hands. Please, call me Salvatore, or whatever you want. She nodded once, weakly. The corner of her mouth turned up. Salvatore. Damien crossed to the bed. He took her free hand in both of his and pressed it against his lips, and his shoulders shook once, and then steadied. After a moment, Salvatore cleared his throat. Maya, may I speak with you? Alone. Just for a few minutes. Damien lifted Sophie from the chair without a word. He carried her past the foot of the bed and out into the corridor, where one of his men stood at the door with a cup of vending machine coffee gone cold. The door clicked shut behind them. The room went quiet. There was only the slow, steady chirp of the heart monitor and the muted hush of air through the vents. Salvatore lowered himself into the chair beside the bed. He did not know what to do with his hands. He folded them in his lap. He unfolded them. He pressed them flat against his thighs. He did not know how to begin. Maya, his voice scraped. I owe you my life. I owe you. So much more than that. She turned her head slowly against the pillow until her eyes found him. You owe me 5 years of my daughter's life. He bowed his head. Yes. You owe me the man I loved. Yes. You owe me my dignity. Yes. She let the silence sit. The machine beside her chirped on. And yet I saved you, Salvatore. Do you know why? He shook his head. He could not raise his eyes from his own hands. Because hatred is what made you do what you did to me. Her voice was thin but very clear. And I refused to give my daughter a grandfather who was killed by hatred, even my own. He cried then, without trying to hide it. The tears slid down a face that had not been honest with itself for half a century. He pressed the heel of his hand against his mouth to keep from making sound, and the sound came out anyway. Low, broken, old. After a while he steadied himself. He told her about his father. He told her about the bar in Harlem, and the boy at the end of it with a Coca-Cola, and the man called Walker, and his mother's parlor afterward. He told her about the lessons he had been given and had taken into himself. He told her things he had never said aloud in his entire life. Maya listened. She did not interrupt. She did not soften her face for him. She only listened, the way she had listened to dying men in emergency rooms when no one else had time. When he finished, she spoke. Salvatore, your father was killed by a criminal, not by a race, and the criminal who killed him isn't me, isn't Sophie, isn't every black person you have ever feared. He nodded slowly. The tears came again. I understand that now. He looked up at last. It took me 50 years, and a bullet meant for me to understand. Her right hand moved across the white sheet. It found his where it rested on the rail of the bed. Her fingers closed over his knuckles. The gesture surprised them both. Then you have time left. Her voice was quiet. Don't waste it. Salvatore Castellano made a sound that was not quite a sob and not quite a laugh. He bent his head and pressed his lips to the back of her hand, the way old Italian men kissed the hand of a woman they had wronged in a country he had not lived in for 60 years. Will you? He had to swallow. Will you let me be Sophie's grandfather? Properly this time? Maya gave a small, soft laugh. It was a tired laugh, full of pain medication and something else. That isn't my decision, Salvatore. It is hers. And Damien's. And yours, Maya. You are her mother. She held his eyes for a long moment. Yes. With time. Yes. He stayed beside her chair a few minutes longer until his breathing came back to him. Then he stood. He was at the door, his hand on the knob, when he stopped. He did not turn fully back. He spoke to the wood. Maya, will you marry my son? She blinked. What? He turned now. His old face was wet but composed. He has loved you for 5 years, even when he thought he hated you. He has never loved anyone else. He never will. Marry him. Become a Castellano, properly. For the first time in any room they had ever shared, Maya laughed at something Salvatore said. A real laugh, just one note, surprised out of her by the absurdity of it. That isn't how this works, Salvatore. Her voice was warm and tired. Damien has to ask me. And I am not even sure I'll say yes. He inclined his head, an old courtly motion she had never seen him make before. Fair enough. He almost smiled. But I will pray you say yes. He stepped out. A moment later the door opened again, and Damien came in alone. He had handed Sophie to Rosa, who had arrived in the hour before dawn with a plate of cookies wrapped in a tea towel, as if a hospital corridor at 6 in the morning required a bribe. Damien crossed the small room and lowered himself into the chair Salvatore had left warm. He took her right hand in both of his. He did not speak. Maya turned her face against the pillow toward him. The corner of her mouth lifted. Your father is changed. He kissed her knuckles. He has a long way to go. So do we. I know. Her eyes were already drifting under the weight of the morphine. She fought it for a few seconds, watching him, then let it take her. Her hand stayed loose in his. He sat in the hard plastic chair beside her bed, all the way through the morning, into the afternoon, and through the long second night. He did not move except to refill the cup of water on her tray. The heart monitor went on chirping its small, steady proof beneath his thumb. 3 weeks after the warehouse, Maya was discharged on a quiet Wednesday morning, with her left arm bound in a sling and a bottle of pills in a small white bag. She did not go to Beacon Hill. Damien did not ask her to. He had bought a house instead. It was a small white colonial on a tree-lined street in Brookline, 4 bedrooms, a screened porch at the back, a maple tree in the front yard already turning yellow at the tips. He had put it in her name without telling her. The deed sat on the kitchen counter when she walked in, with a single line on a folded note in his handwriting. Yours, whether you keep me or not. She read it twice, and did not cry. But she folded the note and put it in the drawer beneath the silverware, which Damien took as the answer he had not let himself ask for. He came every day. He never assumed an invitation. He rang the bell at 6 in the evening. the way a man rings the bell of a house that does not belong to him. And he waited until Sophie threw the door open and shouted, "Daddy." He cooked sometimes. Maya cooked more often. He read to Sophie at bedtime, the same chapter book they had started in the safe house. And when Sophie's eyes finally closed, he came down the stairs and slept on the long couch in the living room. He did not climb to the second floor. Maya did not ask him to. Sophie began to call him Daddy and Maya Mama without thinking about it, the way she had done as a baby and then stopped doing 5 years ago when the words had gotten lost. Mama June moved into a small apartment 2 blocks away. She refused the bigger one Damien offered, and refused the car and accepted only a standing dinner invitation on Sundays. Salvatore came every Saturday. He brought white roses for Maya and something small for Sophie, a coloring book, a hair ribbon, once a music box that played the chorus of an old Sicilian lullaby. The first Saturday, Sophie climbed into his lap of her own accord. The old man's eyes filled, and he did not bother to hide it. He held her against his chest with both hands as though he were afraid of dropping her. Sophie tilted her head up and studied his face with serious 6-year-old curiosity. "Grandpa, why do grown-ups cry so much?" He pressed his lips against her hair. "Because we hold our tears for too long, little girl." The conversations between Damien and Maya came slower, and they came in pieces. They came in the kitchen while she sliced peppers one-handed and he stirred the pot. They came on the porch in the evening with 2 mugs of tea between them. He apologized in detail. Not the sweeping apology of a man begging to be done with the matter, but a specific one, a particular memory each time, the year, the room, the day he had failed her in a way he was only now seeing. She told him, eventually, about the night her heart had given out in Mama June's kitchen, with Sophie crying in the next room, and the EMT who had said 1 more minute. "Ma'am." She told him about the Christmas she had stood in a Roxbury department store watching another father kneel to fix his daughter's coat zipper, and how she had walked all the way home in the snow because the bus was too crowded for the way her chest hurt. Damien wept openly that night. He did not try to stop himself. "I should have looked harder. Maya, I should have searched every street. You couldn't have known what your father did. That isn't an excuse." She watched him for a long moment. "No, it isn't. But it is a beginning." A few nights later, on the porch after Sophie had gone up, he asked her quietly, "Maya, do you trust me yet?" She thought about it. She did not lie. Not fully, but more than yesterday. He smiled. It was a small, tired, real smile. "That is enough for now." She leaned sideways. She rested her head against his shoulder, the way she had 1,000 times in another life, in another kitchen, in another year. He did not move and did not turn his face to her hair. He simply lifted his good arm and drew her in against his chest and let her stay. The weeks that followed had a softness to them that surprised both of them. They laughed more. Sophie chattered through dinners. She gathered the names of her people the way other children gathered seashells. Mommy, Daddy, Grandpa, Nana Rosa, Mama June. She listed them at bedtime like a prayer. One evening at the kitchen table, she set down her crayon and looked at both of them. "Daddy, why don't you and Mommy live together like in books?" Damien looked at Maya. Maya looked at him. "Because Mommy has to choose, baby." His voice was even. "Not me." Maya gave a small, soft laugh and looked down at her hands. That night, Sophie went to sleep with the music box playing low. Maya came down the stairs in her bare feet and crossed the rug to where Damien sat at the end of the couch. The lamp behind him turned low, a paperback open and unread on his knee. She lowered herself beside him. "Damien, what if I am ready to choose?" He turned his head. He looked at her. She gave him the smallest smile he had ever seen on her, and her eyes were wet. "Don't make me say it twice." He did not say anything. He reached for her with both arms and pulled her into his chest, and he pressed his face into her curls, and his shoulders shook once, and then steadied. After a long minute, he eased her back. He slid off the couch onto one knee on the rug. From the inside pocket of his jacket, where he had been carrying it every day for 11 days, he drew out a small velvet box. The ring inside the velvet box was not the kind of ring a man like Damien Castellano was expected to choose. It had no large stone. It was a slim band of white gold with a small heart at the center. Simple, almost shy. He had asked the jeweler to shape it the way the heart on Sophie's bracelet had been shaped. He had wanted Maya to look at her own hand one day and see her daughter on it. He stayed on one knee on the rug. "Maya Brooks, will you marry me? For real this time. With everyone watching. With our daughter as flower girl. Will you?" She was already crying. She was already laughing. Both at once. The way a woman laughs and cries when a thing she had stopped letting herself want has finally come back into the room. "Yes, Damien Castellano. Yes. Down the hallway, a small bedroom door flew open. Bare feet hit the wood floor at a full run. Sophie skidded into the living room in her pajamas, eyes huge, both hands pressed against her cheeks. Daddy asked Mommy. She launched herself at them both. The three of them ended up tangled on the rug in a knot of arms and tears and breathless laughter, and the velvet box rolled away under the couch and was forgotten until morning. The next morning, Damien called his father from the kitchen. Salvatore answered on the second ring. He listened. Then, on the line, the old man cried. He cried the way men cried when they were old enough to know exactly how much grace they had been given. I will pay for everything. He kept saying it. The biggest wedding, the best one, whatever you want. Maya leaned over the speaker, her good shoulder against Damien's. Salvatore. No, we want a small wedding. Family only. There was a long pause, then a soft, surprised laugh from the other end. As you wish, my daughter. He had never used that word before. Maya pressed her lips together and did not trust her voice for a moment. 2 months later, on a clear blue Saturday at the end of October, the wedding was held on the lawn behind the cedar-shingled cottage at the Cape. The same house that had nearly become the worst memory of their lives became, by some quiet mercy, the place where the next chapter began. The guests fit in 24 chairs. Salvatore was there, in a charcoal suit, his white hair combed back. Mama June wore lavender. Rosa wept openly the entire ceremony. Tony stood at the back in his usual dark suit and cried into his pocket square when he thought no one was looking. Marcus Wells came too, after Damien had driven down to Roxbury alone in September and apologized to him in his own kitchen for an hour without sitting down. 3 of Maya's nurse friends from the clinic flew in. That was all. Sophie was the flower girl. She wore a small white dress, white shoes, and on her left wrist, the silver bracelet, which now fit a little snugger against her growing arm. She walked down the aisle of folded chairs ahead of her mother and dropped one petal at a time, with great seriousness, like a girl who had been waiting half her life for the job. Maya's dress was simple. Ivory, sleeveless on the right, gathered carefully over the still pink scar on her left shoulder. She wore no jewelry except the new ring. Salvatore Castellano walked her down the aisle. Her own father had died when she was 19. The old boss had asked, in a careful voice over Sunday dinner 3 weeks before, whether she would let him do this thing for her. She had said yes. When they reached the small white arch at the front, Salvatore turned to her. He did not let go of her arm right away. I am so sorry, Maya. For everything. I forgive you, Salvatore. Truly. He kissed her hand and stepped back to give her to his son. The ceremony was short and warm. The minister was a friend from Mama June's church. He had just begun the vows. Do you take this woman? When a small voice from the front row chimed in. They both say yes. Hurry up. Everyone laughed. Damien wiped his eyes with the heel of his hand. The minister smiled and finished the line anyway. When Damien finally kissed his wife, he kissed her slowly, the way a man kisses a promise he has waited 5 years to keep. Mama June crossed the small lawn afterward and took Salvatore Castellano by both hands. You and I have a lot of catching up to do, Salvatore. I have a great deal to learn from you, June. The reception spilled onto the beach as the sun went down. Sophie danced barefoot in the sand between her 2 grandmothers and her grandfather, holding a hand on each side. Damien led Maya in a slow, careful turn, mindful of her shoulder. Are you happy, Mrs. Castellano? She rested her cheek against his lapel. I am getting there, Mr. Castellano. That night, after the last guests had gone, the 3 of them sat on the porch in a single long blanket and watched the dark Atlantic move under a sky full of stars. Sophie fell asleep between her parents with her head on her mother's lap. Damien held the old wooden box in both hands. He had carried it down from Boston in the trunk. It had earned its place at this wedding more than any of them. Dear viewers, every family carries a box of some kind, a place where pain is stored when no one knows what else to do with it. The lesson the Castellanos learned was simple and very hard. Truth that is buried does not stay quiet, it waits. And when love is brave enough to open the lid, even after years, healing becomes possible. Hatred passed down can be stopped. Forgiveness, given freely, is the only inheritance that ever truly enriches a family. If this story moved your heart, please give the video a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss the next emotional story we bring you. We would love to know what you felt while watching. Did this story remind you of someone in your own life? A parent? A child? A love you thought was lost? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one, and your words mean the world to us. Wishing each of you good health, peace in your home, and joy in the small moments of every ordinary day. Thank you for being here with us. We will see you in the next video. Take care of yourselves, and take care of the people you love.